morning. This is Dr. Caroline Whitfield at Strathclyde Business School, and today we're continuing our series of podcasts around entrepreneurship with a particular view, although not exclusively, on female entrepreneurship. And today we're joined by Noel Mathias, who will introduce himself in a second. But the reason for inviting him is a very interesting perspective on entrepreneurship in two areas. One is East End of Glasgow, and the other is some of the poorest areas of Mumbai. So we'll explore this and see where it goes. And first of all, can I welcome you, Noel, to Strathclyde?
Thank you. I feel like an imposter already, because it's female entrepreneurship and you're speaking to a male here who should never be trusted to speak on behalf of women. So there you go.
Well, that's true, but I think as a field, it should be about building bridges and engagement and finding allies. And ultimately, we're talking about contributing to society from all perspectives. So you're very much welcome. And your views are very welcome. And I don't also speak on behalf of anyone other, but at least we can explore the territory with it. So we're going to really start off, if I can ask you, maybe just to talk a bit about your own route into this area of assisting community and economic development within community in the different places.
Sure. Probably a couple of pathways to it. One is my own cultural background, and the other one was my immersion into the Scottish culture and background. In terms of my own background, I was formerly a Catholic priest, worked in the slums, worked in urban locations. But more importantly, I think it was my upbringing that has informed this. My mom, who's a very influential figure in my life, who had a large community around her to not just survive, but thrive in poor conditions. My dad used to go to a factory and work there, earning about 15-20 pounds a month. But my mom, along with the community, found money to save. And they were genuine entrepreneurs, very resourceful people. So that was one element of it. The other element was when I came to Scotland and saw women like my mom working very hard and trying to make ends meet. But no sense of, or there was no sense of mobility, either social or economic. They were in the same area, same communities for decades. Their children were doing the same stuff, and it felt like we've become quite stuck here. There was a lot of interventions being made in our communities, but no extra value being added, or at least not on the economic front. And that's when I began to question and say, what's happening here? Could we kind of bring these two together and create a space for people to recognize their abilities and skills? And I knew from my experience, most people are held in their lives or in their aspirations by a community around them. None of us get to where we are by ourselves. And those were my two basic sort of insights and bringing people together, therefore.
So as well as your different bilocations, what are some of the places? Just give us a little flavor. So perhaps maybe 2 or 3 places that you observe that sense of stagnation or community stuckness, and also in India. What sort of, just maybe give some flavor.
Yeah, so I think let me speak about Glasgow, for instance, in a couple of places where I worked, where there were large churches and community centers. A lot of community development work, including mothers and toddlers groups, for example, youth work, and some really good stuff happening there. But a lot of them were very programmatic approaches, which meant that when the program finished, people had to move on with their lives, or when the funding came to an end, they just stopped. In one particular place, there was an amazing women's group that was really thriving, people building up their confidence, but there was no way they could scale because they were so dependent on funding. If there was no money, they didn't know where or how to meet. And that became a fascinating question for me as to how do we have such good, thriving community groups, but still dependent on external sources to make their life happen. And that's when the question came, what if they had a different system of owning, having a stake in what they do? And the parallel to that, therefore, was when we did begin this piece of work, a group of 8 women building community, building enterprise in Proven Mill on Royston Road, completely on their own, creating their own business, creating their own funding streams, and not looking back for the last 12, 13 years. So it is possible in that regard.
So what's an interesting observation you're making is that so many interventions or desires to change are externally orientated. And yet the approach that you've observed as most successful is one where it's inner generated. And I'm curious, because so many people think, well, something must be done. But in fact, what appears to be your observation is the unlocking must come from inside and almost without intervention.
Yeah.
What's the balance you found between that?
Yeah. So the thing I began 13 years back is called WEvolution. And it works with small, powerful groups that were formerly called self-reliant groups. So we've pioneered that concept here in the UK. What we found over the last 13 years is 90% of the women who come to us come looking for confidence and community. And WEvolution is exceptionally good at creating community. And there are 3 pillars for creating that community. One is very ordinary, simple human connections. The second is everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging, and we provide that at WEvolution. And the third is very precious bonds of trust. Once you have those 3 pillars in place, the inevitable thing we've noticed is people recover their agency and confidence. And once they recover that, you then have some very inevitable consequences. They are taking more risks, they are making better choices, they are better parents at home, their health is dramatically improved, and a lot of them start creating things. That's when entrepreneurship comes in, for example. So for us, that's the balance to be able to have where we can provide community, because that's what women are looking for. But in that space, free them to recover their own confidence. So at no point will WEvolution will say we have empowered the women. No, they empower themselves, but they empower themselves in the company of each other. And that's the beauty of what we do, going against the individualistic paradigms that we have in our society.
So what's fascinating is the parallels are also in places like some of the findings from microfinance, just to share with you. So microfinance is a model that's been tried in other places around the world. Where it has worked most successfully is where it is with women. And it is exactly as you say, it's working, and there often there's existing sense of community, small social groups. But if you give someone the proverbial £2, they'll meet up with their neighbours, they'll buy some chickens, and they'll do it, and then it goes on. But what's interesting is also the trust, because the default rate, if you give women something like that in their community, is pretty much nil.
Absolutely.
Because they won't let each other down.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating example that you found, albeit a different routine in parts of Glasgow.
A UN study would say that more money in the hands of women is very likely to go into their children, their education.
Exactly.
And that is borne out by a lot of evidence in our groups. 74% of the women will say that they have become better role models for their kids. And we find all of those things linking into a real sense of community for women.
There's one of the other observations, again, from the academic literature and other conversations we've had, is about the social acceptability of women as entrepreneurs and not wanting to either play on gender, of course not, but also often having different motivations which are misunderstood. What's also interesting is coming back to this idea of the collective, because in a UK context, if there was a queer with, let's say, domestic abuse or anything along those lines, there may be some reluctance by people around to say, should I intervene? Should I do something? It's a matter for the authorities. And this whole idea of waiting for somebody else to intervene as opposed to there isn't anybody, which would be very much the situation, I imagine, in the Mumbai situation. Therefore, there is only yourself, it makes me wonder if we've lost something.
Yeah.
We've lost something in that looking out for each other, which is being refound in the groups that you're setting up around Scotland.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it saddens me that within the UK society, within the Scottish community, we have some incredible individuals who genuinely want to make change, but systems do not allow it sometimes. In terms, for example, of interventions by state agencies or we tend to have a hands-off policy, therefore, because privacy and individualism has made it a tad harder for us.
Because people want to do the right thing. They don't obviously want to do something that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
But I guess that leads to a different set of decisions.
It does, yeah. And that's what we want to, we don't want to disrupt that, but we want to build parallel systems where people can still care for each other, where we don't feel awkward about correcting a child just because we have a policy that we should not intervene, for example. And I think that's where we're trying to, we're not trying to go back to the past because there is no going back, but it's trying to craft different circumstances or systems for the current times to take care of the individual, but also of the family. Because our change comes from building new cultural fabrics, not just different strategies and processes. One of the biggest things we've set out to do as WEvolution is to improve the environment around people. And then enable them to take the choice or control. We have a group in Strathclyde, for example, called 5 Mummies Make, who every year organize a tea party, and they use the proceeds to fund a cancer charity. Or they've organized in the past school uniform swaps to help about 75 families, with issues around poverty. So what you find is a genuine concern, but also a very entrepreneurial way of looking at that concern. So it's not a programmatic intervention where they're looking for funds elsewhere, but creating space to take charge themselves.
It's fascinating because, again, almost in economics term, it's like the biggest market failure, which you often see for intervention reasons. People say, oh, well, we have to invest for this. But what you're describing is the biggest market failure is the absence of community. And then that being used, the market force, as it were, through your social enterprising activities. I want to extend that one level further, if I may, because you spend a lot of time comparing and actually enabling other people to share the experience immersively of taking people from the UK and Mumbai, meeting the sort of women you described and many others. But what's fascinating from an outside observer into the Indian scene is all of the activities you described with no state context, with no savings, with nothing, and yet barefoot entrepreneurialism, as we would call it, or a very early stage, is hugely flourishing. Why is it that people with no means whatsoever actually are able to start and go forward, whereas often the question is here, and is it they still can? And you've described very eloquently how a lot of it's based if they're within a community and they can empower themselves. But I'm interested in your perspective, almost, what would you say to people who say, well, I can't start anything, I don't have any money, I don't have skills, I don't know anyone, so their social capital is low, financial capital, maybe their community capital is low. But those would be tremendous findings or insights from the Mumbai women. Maybe you could just say a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
That comparison.
I think probably 2 or 3 points there, which is one, of course, is that in a place like India, urgency and emergency is just part of people's lives. And there is no safety net like the welfare system. So if you don't do it, you don't eat for the night. I think there is one of that element there. The second is that within the Indian society, the informal sector is very, very strong. It's sophisticated and it's robust. And within that, there are thousands and millions of people, women especially. So my mom, for example, when she wanted to make ends meet, just fell back on a little skill she had picked up as a child, which was sewing. And she found an old machine, and every day she would sew a top for a sari for a woman, and every day she would earn 5 pence. That was the way she built up the savings and funded our education, and then decided to do babysitting at home. Now, some of it didn't have regulations, nothing around. So there is that valid point. I think the fluidity there. But it enabled people just to get on with it. And then when I came to Scotland, I found that people wanted to get on with it, but couldn't, because of the universal credit now that has the rules around what you can earn, what you cannot earn. Because of the way our systems are structured, where we have regulatory frameworks that are meant to save and make us safe, but are also preventing people to go on. I used to say in the past, it may have changed, that if I was in India and needed to make some money to feed my family, because I love cooking, I'd go into the kitchen, cook something, go out on the street and sell it. Yeah, there's not much capital required to do that. All I need is just do it.
A universal need.
Absolutely. Whereas here, there are about 8 or 9 permissions to be taken before you start selling something. And I used to say that the more empowered you are, and if you have capital, influence, education, it's much easier to access those 9 or get those 9 permissions.
Yeah, it's where your social capital comes through, your confidence.
Absolutely. But the lower down the ladder you are, it becomes increasingly hard, and the likelihood of the person saying, I don't want to do it, it's too difficult. So we have a lot of people who come to WEvolution who say they don't have the skills, they don't have the wherewithal to do this. And at the risk of repeating myself, again, you just create a community where they are watching others doing, and they're saying, well, that's possible then.
If they can do it, then what's stopping me?
Absolutely.
Do you find a pooling of skills as well? Yeah. So you say, okay, well, I don't have it all on my own, but, they know this person, they know that person, or they may know someone who's done a similar process.
Brilliant. That's exactly what we do through the movement. So we have got Agne, who is on Cathcart Road in Glasgow, who started this amazing pastry shop, wholesale pastry shop. She's now being crowdfunded through the Women's Business Centre, who began in a little group. And that's where she found her inspiration and also her emotional support, as much as support for her business plans to start and grow her business. Or you have, going back to Proven Mill, 8 women. They started with a lunch club, but also knew that one of their members had this aspiration of starting a laundry business. And so they pulled in their savings, they pulled in their expertise, and helped to start a fluff and fold laundry business that's still ongoing at St. Paul's Church in Proven Mill. Or you have somebody up in Fife who's about to start an African product store online and a physical outlet. You have someone who started a co-working space in Paisley. All of them have done this in the company of each other, where they have found the emotional support, but also the skills. So Agne, for example, is being helped in her accounting systems by a person from another small, powerful group. Because and that's how we share our skills, and that's how confidence is built up, not because I know everything, but because I know there are people around me who can help me when I don't know anything.
And also the confidence to realize it's no longer a solo activity.
Absolutely.
Again, is a lot of the myth, right? A lot of the myth is around entrepreneurship, whether it's social entrepreneurship or financial entrepreneurship, is one person sitting there doing it all. And you're just demonstrating again, in this case, through the community aspect, but more widely, that it's actually how you reach out to other people. I'm curious as well around the area of agency you mentioned, because the examples you've given are of people who probably started, as you mentioned, with very little solo confidence and collectively built a sense of community. As you said, the confidence lifted, trust lifted. But this sense of self is a very interesting thing, which again, academics look into to really try and understand what are the conditions to enable agency to be expressed, but also how does agency change? Mm-hmm. How does it expand or contract based on circumstances? and particularly how entrepreneurship for everybody can be an unlocker of agency. You've touched on this, but I was wondering again, maybe some examples from both places that would be useful. So it's not just the outer manifestation of that journey, but how people feel about themselves and the power that they have in their lives through what they've been doing and through the groups you've started.
So we have a group in Mary Hill, and now the members have moved on, some of them. So there was this member there. This was just around the time of Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, and there were stalls in the Merchant City. And this group had begun in 2011, 10 of them, and all of them coming from quite horrific backgrounds. But bonding together, starting to save small amounts of money, because that was the ethos, or is the ethos, of small, powerful groups. And then saying, well, let's learn something together. None of us are good at anything. That's the first bit they say. And one of them, who came from an ethnic minority background, said, I know how to sew. I can teach you how to do that. I don't know English, though. Will you teach me English? So they made a social contract where they taught her English, and she taught all of them to sew. They looked around, and they, again, because of resourcefulness, they had decided they will not depend on grants. So they asked for donations, and they found 4 rickety old sewing machines, and 2 of them blew up. Yeah, there goes your safety checks. But all the 2 of them, they made some products. The long story being that in about 2 years' time, they had made enough money for everyone to own a sewing machine on their own. And they were making
And they
products.
also now had the skills.
Absolutely. So the immense pride there. And then you have the Merchant City stall, and there they are trying to sell their stuff, and somebody buys some stuff. And this person was jumping for joy, and my team member who was there, she thought something had happened, but this person was saying, someone has bought my product. Someone has bought my product. The immense sense of pride, of understanding that she's now a contributor of value to the society, can do miracles to one's agency.
Yes.
And I think that's the sort of examples we've seen at scale in all of our groups. But that sort of example remained in my head, and sort of say that when people begin to see that their worth is tied up in how the society values them, they begin to it's not so much about monetizing the worth, but it's just being able to see for themselves that they are worthy human beings. And that probably was the most powerful statement I've heard in all these 13 years, when women have said to me, we feel worthy having been part of the groups and done what we've done. And part of the challenge, I suppose, is in the way we've siloed the way we work with people in deprived communities, I think. So it's going back to the Mumbai experience. But one of my frustrations in Scotland, in the UK, but also I suppose it's sort of the wider Western psyche, has been in the way we've compartmentalized the social and the economic. I used to say that in the way our society is structured here, especially in deprived communities, is that if I have a mental health issue, there's a mental health charity here dealing with it. But if I'm hungry, the mental health charity will say, it's not us, you go to a food bank. At the food bank, if I say, look, I have debt issues, which is why I'm coming to the food bank, they'll say, it's not us, you go to the debt solving agency. And of course, if I have an enterprising idea, then the debt agency is not us, you go to Business Gateway.
Yes.
This way, so you kind of go round and round the circles all your life. So each of this is kind of taking a part of your life and trying to fix it. And that's a silo sort of
less holistic
we have, and that's probably part of what the endemic sort of problem we have, which is why we don't build communities that hold the whole person, then encourages not just economic but social, psychological impacts at scale.
This is an immense journey you've been on, as you said, from Catholic priests to some rural parishes in Gujarat, if I remember correctly, all the way to interesting dynamics and groups in different parts of Scotland and then going back. What do you find the most satisfying out of the 13 years journey that you've done? What really just gives you immense satisfaction about what is now being created?
My biggest satisfaction comes when women who've been through the ranks then start telling others the story to draw them in. The richness of that experience always amazes me, but it also tells me that this movement can go on beyond me. People tell their stories and they genuinely want to draw others in. As a business, if it can be seen as one, there is no greater satisfaction than to see the longevity of what you've created in Scotland. So for me, that's my biggest satisfaction, I think.
The momentum continues, etc. And can I maybe just go to some of the things you're doing now, which is, I think you're very much involved in trying to take some of the insights and continue to build bridges between the two places. So obviously there's tremendous bridges already between Scotland and parts of India, but can you say a little about what you've got coming up and perhaps how people could think about getting involved?
Sure. I'm a restless being and constantly hoping to learn, but also translate the learning into action. So my latest initiative is called Novel Solutions to Wicked Problems. And this time I'm aiming to bring together a cohort of curious, humble, hungry to be inspired, and courageous leaders from universities, industries, social enterprises, any background. And I want to take them to India and look at the whole notion of circular economy, sustainability. Again, how is it done not just at a macro level, but in small grassroots action that are still at scale and not in small numbers? How do we create diversity, not just collaboration? And finally, what does frugal innovation looks like as opposed to just lean innovation processes? I want to be able to challenge a different set of minds and see what we can come off with after the trip. So that's my latest initiative.
That would be fascinating. And how could people get in contact with you if they wanted to discuss this or find out also more about what WEvolution is doing?
Sure, we have a website, novelsolutions.co.uk. They can get in touch with me directly. You can find my email address at wevolution.org.uk or on LinkedIn. So plenty of ways to get in touch, and spaces are filling up quickly. But I'd love to discuss anyone who wants to come along with me in March 2024.
That's fantastic. It's been an absolute privilege to have you come to Strathclyde, and I hope you feel you're amongst friends here. Hope to see you again. And thanks very much again.
Thank you, Caroline. This has been a privilege myself. Thank you.